They say DNA doesn't lie, but no one warns you about the chaos the truth can unleash. My name is Elena Foster. I'm 33, a wife, a mother, and until recently, I believed I understood who I was. I grew up in a warm, if slightly overprotective, home in upstate New York. My parents, Mark and Linda, were kind, structured, and deeply committed to making sure I always felt safe. I always knew I was adopted. It wasn't a family secret. They told me when I was 6, with storybooks and soft smiles, about how they had chosen me. That word stuck. Chosen. Not abandoned. Not rejected. Chosen. And for most of my life, that explanation was enough. I wasn't the kind of adoptee who carried deep resentment. I didn't go digging through dusty court records or begging for answers from caseworkers. I believe, truly, that my birth mother must have done what she did out of love, that she gave me up for a better life. So for decades, I left it alone. I honored my parents' boundaries. I didn't poke the wound, but something always lingered. It wasn't dramatic, just subtle questions. Did I laugh like her? Did I have her eyes? Were there any genetic health issues I should know about? Did she ever think of me on my birthday? The questions were whispers. I ignored them until I couldn't anymore. It all started during lunch break one Monday. I was sitting with my coworkers at the marketing agency I'd worked at for 5 years. Someone brought up ancestry kits, those at-home DNA tests that give you a breakdown of your heritage. People were joking about being part Viking or 3% Neanderthal. One of the interns showed off her phone and said, "Look, it says I have a half-sister I never knew about." Everyone laughed, but my stomach dropped. That night, after I put my daughter Ava to bed and my husband Adam fell asleep on the couch with the TV blaring, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. The Ancestry site glowed on the screen. I hesitated, then clicked Order Kit. I didn't tell anyone. Not Adam. Not my parents. Not even my best friend. It felt like a private door I was opening, one I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. 3 weeks later, the email came. Your DNA results are ready. I opened it expecting colorful pie charts and maybe some general ethnic data. But instead, right at the top of the page, bolded and impossible to miss, was a name. Teresa Langford, 50% DNA match, parent. My breath caught in my throat. My heart slammed in my chest. A parent. My biological mother. Beneath her name was another match. Jordan Langford, 25% DNA match, half-sibling. I stared at the screen like it was in another language. I had gone looking for roots and found people. Names. Lives. Teresa was real. And alive. She lived in Vermont, just 2 states away. She had an active Facebook account, one I clicked on instinctively. Her profile photo was a family Christmas picture. She was smiling, arms around 2 teenagers. A tall man with graying hair stood behind her. She looked happy, comfortable, complete. 1,000 thoughts flooded in. Does she think of me? Does she regret giving me up? Does she even want to hear from me? I didn't realize I was crying until a tear hit the trackpad. I didn't sleep that night. When Adam found me in the kitchen at 5 a.m., I was still staring at her photo. "Elena, what's going on?" he asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. I told him everything about the test, the results, the match. He sat in silence for a while, then finally said, "Do you want to reach out to her?" I nodded. "I think I have to." Later that day, I sent a message. Nothing heavy. Just, "Hi, Teresa. I recently took a DNA test, and it looks like we're a close match. I think you may be my biological mother. I just want to understand more, if you're open to it." No pressure. And then I waited. 2 days passed, then 3, then 5. I began to tell myself she wasn't going to reply, that maybe she changed her name and moved on, that this life she had now, the husband, the teenage kids, the big country house in Vermont, it didn't have space for a ghost from her past. But on the 6th day at 9:43 p.m., I got a message back. It was only 2 sentences. Hi, Elena. Yes, I think you are. Please give me some time. This is a lot to process. I read it over and over. Relief crashed into confusion. I'd expected a dozen possible responses, but not this one. What did a lot to process mean? Was she in shock? Ashamed? Hiding something? Adam suggested I be patient. But patience was hard when the person on the other end might hold the key to your entire identity. Still, I gave her space. I didn't follow up. I didn't push. Until 2 weeks later, when she messaged again. I want to be honest. I never thought I'd hear from you. I told myself it was best to close that chapter. But you have every right to ask questions. Would you be open to a phone call? My fingers trembled as I typed back. Yes, anytime. We set a time for the following evening. I remember pacing in the living room for almost an hour before dialing. Adam had taken Ava out for ice cream, so I could have the house to myself. When I finally called, she picked up on the second ring. Hello. Her voice was soft, nervous. Hi, Teresa. A pause. Yes. I didn't know what to say next. So I just blurted, I'm Elena. And just like that, the wall between us cracked. The conversation lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. She told me that she was only 19 when she had me, that she was in college, that my father was a married professor who vanished the second she told him she was pregnant. Her parents were conservative, strict, and scandal-averse. She said she was shipped off to a home for unwed mothers, where everything was clinical and cold. I wanted to keep you, she whispered, but they wouldn't let me. I was scared, alone. I signed the papers and I cried for weeks. She said she'd always wondered what became of me, but after marrying her husband and having 2 more children, she buried the past. Told herself it was better that way. I didn't know how to explain it to them, she said. I didn't know how to explain it to myself. I told her I wasn't angry, that I had a good life, good parents, that I just wanted the truth. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing in 2 realities at once, the life I had and the life I could have had. But the next part shocked me, because Teresa confessed something I didn't see coming. Mark and Linda, your adoptive parents, they're not strangers. I knew them. I froze. What do you mean? They were friends of my parents. They lived in the same town. When I was pregnant, my mother told me they were trying to adopt. She arranged everything. Told me I'd never have to see you again. That they'd give you a better life. The ground beneath me shifted. This wasn't a distant, closed adoption. This was orchestrated. Personal. Wait, I said. You're telling me my parents knew who you were? They did, she said. I wasn't supposed to contact you. It was part of the agreement. I thought they told you. They hadn't. Mark and Linda never said a word about knowing her. Never mentioned that they'd been part of the decision. That they had agreed to erase her from my life. I felt sick. I thanked her for the call. Told her I needed time. And then I hung up. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, staring at the baby photos on our mantel, and all I could think was, what else had they hidden? The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. It was early. The sky was still gray, and the neighborhood hadn't quite woken up. But I couldn't wait. I couldn't keep these questions buried any longer. Linda opened the door in her robe, holding a cup of tea. Elena, is everything okay? No, I said. We need to talk. Mark was already in the kitchen, reading the paper like he did every morning. I sat down across from them, heart racing. I spoke to Teresa. Their faces went pale. Linda's hands trembled slightly as she set her mug down. Mark said nothing. He folded his paper once. Then again. I know everything, I said. You knew who she was. You knew her family. You were part of the arrangement. Silence. Then Linda whispered, we did what we thought was best. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because of the absurd weight of it all. Best for who? Mark finally spoke. She was a scared teenager. She wanted you to have a good life. And we were desperate. We couldn't have kids. It all happened so fast. And lying to me for 30 years? That was part of the plan, too. Linda's eyes filled with tears. We were going to tell you one day. We just never found the right time. And then time kept passing. I stood up. My chest was tight. You had a relationship with her family. You told me she was a sweet, anonymous woman. You said you didn't know anything. Mark's voice cracked. We loved you, Elena. We still do. That never changed. But I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. So I left. Back home, I collapsed onto the couch, tears soaking into my sleeves. Adam pulled me close, but didn't say anything. He just held me while I unraveled. That day, I felt like I'd lost two families at once. The next few weeks were a blur. I stopped answering calls. I ignored texts from my parents and didn't reply to Teresa's follow-up message either. I went to work, came home, and stared at the walls like a ghost. Then one night, Ava asked, Mommy, why are you sad all the time? I froze. I looked at her, really looked at her, and something inside me clicked. I didn't want her to grow up with questions she couldn't answer. I didn't want her to wonder about her own identity. I didn't want my story to become her confusion. So the next day, I emailed Teresa. Would you like to meet? She replied within an hour. Yes, I'd love that. We met at a quiet park in Vermont, neutral ground. She brought a small box of things. Photos of herself in college. A locket with a baby picture. A handwritten note she'd once started but never sent. Seeing her in person was surreal. She had my eyes, my chin, my nervous fidgeting. We sat on a bench and just talked. She told me about her kids, about her life, how she'd battled depression after giving me up, how she'd eventually found love with a man who accepted her past, even if she didn't speak about it often. I told her about Ava, about Adam, about how I'd grown up, mostly happy, but always with a hole I couldn't name. And then she said something I'll never forget. You're everything I hoped you'd become. When I got home, I sat down with my parents and told them what had happened. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I was willing to talk. Linda cried through most of it. Mark apologized again and again. We never wanted to hurt you, they said. I believed them. But belief didn't erase the pain. The truth is, DNA tests don't just reveal biology. They reveal secrets. They pull back the veil on years, decades of silence. Mine didn't just change my life. It unfolded it. And while I'll always carry the pain of what was hidden, I now have something more powerful than anger. I have answers. I have Teresa. And Ava has a grandmother she never knew she needed. The weeks following that first in-person meeting with Teresa were strange. Not bad. Not painful. Just strange. It felt like a new door had opened. One I couldn't shut, even if I wanted to. We started messaging regularly. Short check-ins. Shared photos. Updates about her family. Her work. What she was making for dinner. It was surreal. ordinary conversation with someone whose existence had once been sealed away from me like some lost chapter. Eventually, we agreed to meet again, this time with her family, her husband, her 2 kids, my half-siblings. Their names were Jordan and Grace. Jordan was in college, smart, soft-spoken, obsessed with indie rock and coding. Grace was 17, opinionated, theatrical, and wore eyeliner like war paint. I was terrified they would hate me, resent me, see me as some scandal reborn. But when we met, Jordan hugged me first, then Grace, then Teresa's husband, Peter, who said kindly, "She's been waiting her whole life for this." We had dinner at their house in Vermont. It was the first time I had seen baby pictures of myself on someone else's face. Grace said, "You look like Mom when she's mad." Jordan added, "You bite your lip the same way." We laughed. We cried. It was both deeply natural and wildly unfamiliar. And when Teresa asked if she could meet Ava, I said yes. We arranged a weekend visit at my house. When Ava saw Teresa, she tilted her head like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Then she said, "You look like Mommy." Teresa smiled so gently it hurt to watch. She crouched and said, "That's because I'm Mommy's mommy." It wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. But it was real. That night, after everyone left, Ava curled up next to me and asked, "Can Grandma Teresa come for my birthday?" I nodded. "Of course, sweetie." In the months that followed, things got easier. The pain softened into something else, something bittersweet, but livable. I slowly rebuilt trust with my adoptive parents. We didn't pretend nothing had happened, but we didn't live in the shadow of it either. I told them that honesty moving forward was non-negotiable. They agreed. They even invited Teresa to Thanksgiving. The table that year was crowded with stories, awkward laughter, long stares, and new beginnings. Mark gave a toast that night and said, "Family isn't always about who raises you or who you come from. Sometimes it's both." But there was still one thing left undone. One mystery I hadn't solved. Who was my biological father? Teresa had only given me a name. Richard, she said. He was older, a professor, married. He vanished when I told him I was pregnant. I'd done a few searches, found a few possibilities, but part of me was scared. What if he denied it? What if he didn't remember her? What if I wasn't the only child he'd left behind? I didn't act on it until I got a message on Ancestry 6 months after my results first dropped. "Hi, Elena. I think I may be your half-brother. Would you be open to connecting?" My heart stopped. He shared DNA with me, 25%, and in his profile photo, he looked exactly like Ava. I stared at the message for a long time. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff. One click could change everything again. His name was Daniel Prescott. He lived in Chicago. He was 34, and he believed we shared a father. I responded cautiously. "Hi, Daniel. I'd be open to chatting. Do you know who our biological father might be?" His reply came 5 minutes later. "I think it was Richard Prescott, my father. But let's talk. There's a lot to unpack." We set up a Zoom call the next evening. When his face appeared on the screen, I gasped. Because if Ava looked like me, Dana looked like us. Same eyes, same mouth, even the same laugh. He was kind, measured, careful with his words. He told me that his father, Richard, had passed away 4 years ago from a stroke, that he was a decorated professor, well respected in academic circles, and that there had always been rumors. He traveled a lot, Daniel said. There were whispers of affairs. Mom pretended not to hear them. He hadn't taken a DNA test to search for siblings. He'd done it for a genealogy project with his daughter. But when my name showed up, a quarter match, he started putting the pieces together. He even found an old photo of Richard at a university conference. The same school Teresa had mentioned. Same year. Same timeline. There was no doubt anymore. Richard was my biological father. Daniel and I sat in silence for a while. Then he smiled and said, "Well, guess that makes us siblings, huh?" I laughed. Through tears I hadn't realized I was crying. Yes, I guess it does. A month later, I flew to Chicago to meet him. He brought his wife, his daughter, and photo albums his mom had saved. We sat around the living room flipping through decades of memories that had once been invisible to me. There were pictures of Richard teaching, hiking, cooking, always smiling. Daniel said he wasn't perfect, but he was present, and I think he would have liked you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I wish I'd had the chance to know him, even just once. Daniel reached over and handed me something. It was a small leather notebook. "My dad's journal," he said. "Found it in the attic last year." Inside were pages and pages of scribbled thoughts, philosophy notes, reflections, quotes. But on one page, dated June 7th, 1992, he wrote, "I made a mistake. A real one. She said she was pregnant. I ran. But I can't stop thinking about her. Or the child. I wonder if they're okay." That was my birthday. He had remembered. He had thought about me. Maybe not every day, but enough to write it down. When I got home from Chicago, I printed out that journal entry. I framed it quietly and placed it beside a photo of Teresa and Ava. 3 pieces of my life, once scattered, now slowly stitching together. Today I have 3 families. One I was raised by, one I was born from, and one I'm choosing to build with the people who showed up, even after the DNA results dropped like bombs. And I've learned that sometimes the truth doesn't break you. It unburdens you. It gives you the right to ask, to search, to remember. So if you're out there wondering whether to take that test, just know this. It might not give you the answers you expect, but it will give you the truth. And sometimes, the truth is the only thing that can set your soul free.